Malice in Wonderland is the 18th episode of the 12th season of CSI, and there will be spoilers from now as I discuss what happens in this episode and mention some things that I liked. And there were some really, really great moments in this. I thought this was a brilliant narrative and one that I really thoroughly enjoyed. So as I said, spoilers from now. And the title comes from the fact that the opening scene is actually at an Alice in Wonderland themed wedding, which is a pretty fun way to start things off. And at this wedding, things get very violent. There is, of course, the classic opening scene murder, and there is the theft of jewellery. And after this, it seems like it's an isolated incident, and then they realise that it isn't. And that another wedding is targeted, a very different wedding. And I have to say I like that. I like that they made things quite varied. The second one gave us a pretty good suspect. I thought the fiancé at the second wedding was definitely somebody I wanted to pay attention to. I thought she was definitely a fascinating character. We didn't actually get to know that much about her, but certainly I found that she was quite interesting. I did not suspect who ultimately was responsible, nor did I suspect the getaway vehicle. And I think it was very cleverly done, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was very well written. I do think that maybe Hodges going into the jewellery store felt a little forced. Yes, his mother thought he was in a relationship with Morgan, and I'll get back to that bit in a moment. But I do feel like her dragging him into a jeweller's felt a little bit forced and also a little bit too much of a coincidence. But other than that, I thought the narrative was very well constructed, very believable. Everything made perfect sense. Everything flowed really well. Very cleverly done and really enjoyable. And then there are several other aspects I'll talk about in a moment, but I just want to mention a few highlights with regards to the attention to detail. As I've mentioned many times, and I'm sure I'll mention it again, one of the things I'm really loving with CSI is how they don't shy away from potentially gory or graphic content. If you're squeamish, CSI might not be for you. I'm generally not, and I really enjoy this part of CSI, and there were two moments in particular that I loved. The first was with the brain, when they found that there was a button in the brain and we see them cutting the brain open, and it was fabulous. And the second bit is the aftermath of the gold being poured down the throat and just what the throat and the top of the chest looked like. I'm just assuming that's what it would look like in reality, but visually it was incredible. It was stunning. I really thoroughly enjoyed that as well. So that was something that I thought was brilliant. At the beginning, they do milk the Alice in Wonderland angle, and I think most of it actually, you don't need to actually acknowledge. If you're not aware of Alice in Wonderland in any detail, you might not pick up on references such as Curiouser and Curiouser. It kind of fits in and feels like an organic way of speaking, but obviously if you're aware of the references, then it just gives it something that little bit extra, and I rather enjoyed that as well. And then we come to Morgan and Hodges. And I have to say Hodges is absolutely one of my favourite characters. Slightly biased because I do really like Wallace Langham, but I think the character is fantastic and often injects just the right amount of humour in scenes when we really need it. And in this episode, his mother is visiting, and he kind of told his mother he was dating somebody. And Morgan comes to the rescue without him realising she was going to do this for him, which was so sweet. And I've thought from the very beginning, well, the beginning of season 12, which is when I started watching it, that if I were to pick off people to pair off, I would pick Hodges and Morgan, I think, just based on season 12 and the episodes that I've seen. I think they'd be very interesting together. And we get a tiny glimmer of what that would look like here. And I just thought it was really beautiful and really, really well done. And then, of course, Hodges gets a chance to shine when they're in the back of the ambulance. And he's telling his mother that all he does is this lab work. And he's kind of playing himself down, but then utilises his knowledge to his advantage and basically helps save the situation. And it's a great chance for his character to have a moment in the spotlight, if you like, because he is often just in the lab and his work is really important, but he's not necessarily the one to save the day in any kind of dramatic or triumphant way. And it's nice for him to have a reason for that to happen. So yes, while, as I said, his mother dragging him into the jeweller's did feel a little bit forced, it also allowed us to have this great moment. So I'm not that bothered about that, but just as a point of maybe not criticism, but observation, I did feel like when he was walking into the jeweller's with his mother, actually, my first thought was when Morgan phoned up and said, I need your help, I thought she was phoning, well, once we saw Hodges, I thought she was phoning Hodges, calling in a favour after what she did for him, and they were going into the jeweller's to set the situation up. That's genuinely what I thought until about 30 seconds afterwards. Then I realised that that's not what was happening. But that's genuinely what I thought that scenario was. But then I also realised they wouldn't put his mother in that situation. So I kind of dismissed that as soon as I thought it. But nevertheless, I enjoyed the episode a lot. I thought it was a brilliant narrative, very well constructed story, some really interesting potential suspects, and ultimately a brilliant narrative development as we hurtle towards the end and get some really awesome results with some really brilliant characters. So I'm happy. Malice in Wonderland is definitely an enjoyable episode.